The world rarely notices them at first glance. They do not demand attention with crowns or banners, yet their presence bends the air around them, subtle and undeniable. They walk into a room and something shifts, not in volume, but in gravity. You may not know why you suddenly feel different, why your chest feels both lighter and heavier, why your skin prickles as though you've brushed against an unseen current. These women carry within them a force that does not ask for permission, a power that is older than words, a presence that resonates with silence itself. They are not chosen by accident. They are chosen because they have walked through fire and carried the ashes of their own past like sacred offerings. The unseen marks they bear are not visible to the untrained eye, but if you know how to look, you will recognize them. Before we step deeper into this journey, I invite you to walk with us in every chapter ahead. If you feel the pull of these words, let them guide you. If you sense the hidden power we are about to unveil, then share this path with others. Like the unseen marks themselves, there is a silence that lives in ordinary rooms, the kind that feels like emptiness, a pause between sounds, a blank space where nothing stirs. But then there is another silence, alive, charged, weighty as a cathedral. This silence belongs to her. It does not need to be announced, nor does it need to demand. When she enters, she brings it with her, like a cloak woven from storms and prayers, and it settles over the space until every heartbeat seems to slow. For most people, silence is a void they fear. They rush to fill it with noise, with chatter, with explanations that soothe their own discomfort. But the woman who carries high spiritual power wears silence differently. To her, it is not a void, but a language, not a weakness, but a strength. Her silence is an act of will, a shield against the chaos of the world, a way of listening that is deeper than hearing. She does not retreat into it as a coward hides in shadows. She steps into it as one would step into sacred ground. Those who encounter her often find themselves unsettled. They expect words, advice, perhaps approval or disapproval, but instead they are met with that charged quiet. It is a mirror. It reflects back what they are unwilling to confront. Some grow nervous and laugh too loudly, desperate to break the stillness. Others feel their own hidden truths rising unbidden, as though her silence calls them to confession. And some, the ones who are ready, recognize it as an invitation, the opening of a door into something vast. Such silence does not come easily. It is earned. It is carved out of years of noise, years of being spoken over, years of having to raise her voice only to be ignored. There was a time when her silence was not chosen, but forced upon her, imposed like chains by those who believed her voice was not worth hearing. But the mark of spiritual power is in what she did with that silence. She did not let it erase her. Instead, she took it into herself, held it until it became something new, something that belonged not to them but to her, in Jung's language. This is the silence of individuation, the moment when a person no longer speaks only the language of society's expectations, but begins to hear the deeper voice within. It is the silence in which the self emerges, not the mask, not the persona, but the true core. For the spiritually powerful woman, this silence is where she met herself for the first time, face to face, unshielded by excuses or borrowed truths. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was necessary. Imagine her sitting alone in a dimly lit room. No distractions. No audience. Just the raw echo of her own thoughts. At first, those thoughts rushed in like a flood. Accusations, regrets, fears. The silence was suffocating. But she stayed. she endured, and in that endurance the flood slowed, the voices quieted. What remained was not emptiness, but presence. She realized that beneath the noise, she had always been there, waiting, patient, eternal. This is why her silence feels different. It is not the silence of absence, but of fullness, not the silence of suppression, but of mastery. It is a silence that holds within it every word she could speak, but chooses not to. It is potential, coiled and alive, like an arrow drawn back, but not yet released. People sense it, even if they cannot name it, because silence like this is not passive. It speaks louder than sound, and when she does speak, the world listens. Her words carry weight precisely because they are born from silence. She does not scatter them carelessly. She places them with intention, each one infused with the gravity of restraint. Those around her may realize, sometimes too late, that her quietude was never emptiness at all, it was power. Distilled, this mark is unseen, but its effects are unmistakable. To witness it is to encounter the paradox of strength that does not shout, of authority that does not command, of power that does not need proof. This is the first sign of the spiritually powerful woman. She is at home in silence, and silence obeys her. Asterisk, the silence follows her into the world, and it unsettles those who have never learned to dwell within their own stillness. Picture her in a crowded room where conversations rise and fall like waves. She does not compete with the noise. She does not press her voice against theirs to be heard. Instead, she waits. Her eyes rest, her breath remains steady, and the silence she carries begins to ripple outward, unnoticed at first, then undeniable. The laughter grows too sharp, the chatter too forced, until one by one people begin to fall quiet. Not because she commands them, but because they feel something shift in her presence. Her silence draws their own buried stillness to the surface, like a tide calling the shore. There are those who mistake this quiet for coldness, who whisper that she is distant, aloof, even arrogant. But this is only the discomfort of those who cannot meet themselves in the mirror of her calm. For others, though her silence is a bomb, they sit beside her and feel the weight of their anxieties lift, not because she soothes them with words, but because her presence reminds them of the strength they have forgotten. They realize that silence is not emptiness, but space, space to breathe, space to feel, space to hear the truths that noise has buried. It is in this way that her silence transforms not just herself, but those around her. She becomes a lighthouse, not by speaking endlessly, but by holding fast to her quiet flame. The spiritually powerful woman does not fear the void within, and because she has made peace with her own depths, she helps others glimpse theirs. Her silence becomes a language of healing, though it is not always gentle. Sometimes it reveals too much, too quickly. People walk away from her unsettled, shaken by what surfaced in them, but the mark remains. Silence plants seeds, and seeds grow in their own time. Even in conflict, her silence is a weapon. Others shout, accuse, demand. They expect resistance, argument, the clash of words against words. But she answers with quiet. It is not submission. It is defiance of another kind. To refuse to be drawn into noise is its own kind of strength. Those who rage against her eventually hear their own voices echoing too loudly, exposed in the absence of reply. They find no enemy in her silence, only themselves reflected back, and often that is the most disarming confrontation of all. There are moments when her silence holds grief, too. It is not always serenity. Sometimes it is heavy with sorrow, with memories she does not speak aloud, with wounds too deep for language. Yet even then, the silence is not weakness. It is honesty. To sit in silence with grief is to honor its weight instead of denying it. This is another form of power, the courage to hold pain without disguising it, without rushing to mask it in words. People sense this, and they learn from it, even if they cannot explain why. Carl Jung wrote that the self emerges through integration, through the union of opposites within. The spiritually powerful woman's silence is not the absence of voice, but the integration of voice and restraint, sound and stillness. It is wholeness expressed through quiet. She has reconciled the need to be heard with the wisdom of when not to speak. That is why her silence feels alive, because it is not repression, it is choice. And there are times, rare but unforgettable, when she chooses to break it. When she does, her words land like thunder in a clear sky. Those listening know instinctively that she does not speak lightly. Each syllable is carved from the bedrock of her restraint, and so each carries a weight beyond measure. Her silence gave birth to her voice, and her voice, when it emerges, carries the resonance of silence within it. This is the paradox of the first mark. She is both quiet and unning, still and commanding, unseen yet unforgettable. Those who encounter her rarely understand what they are witnessing, but they feel it nonetheless. They remember the hush that lingered after she left, the way the air seemed to hold its breath in her absence, and so, in the language of Jung, silence becomes not a lack but a presence, a manifestation of individuation itself. To the spiritually powerful woman, silence is the altar upon which she meets her soul, and those who are drawn into her presence cannot help but sense it, the quiet, the gravity, the power that speaks louder than any sound. This is the first unseen mark, and once you recognize it, you will never mistake it again. There are eyes that look, and then there are eyes that see. To look is to skim the surface, to take in shapes and colors, to name what is obvious. To see is to pierce beyond the surface, to slip through appearances into the marrow of truth. The spiritually powerful woman carries eyes like this. They are not always dramatic or unusual. Sometimes they are the soft brown of earth, sometimes the sharp blue of ice, sometimes the quiet grey of storm clouds. Yet whatever their color, they hold the weight of perception that unsettles even the most guarded soul. People sense it when her gaze falls on them. Some describe it as being red, others as being stripped bare. It is not that she judges. Her gaze is not cruel, but it refuses to be deceived. Masks falter under it. Lies unravel. The false smiles and polished personas that so easily persuade the world dissolve like smoke before her vision. She sees not only what people show, but what they hide. The tremor beneath the confident voice, the sorrow veiled by laughter, the hunger lurking behind ambition. There is a myth in many traditions that speaks of the second sight, the ability to see beyond appearances into the realm of spirits and truths. Jung himself described this in psychological language, calling it the confrontation with shadow. The woman with high spiritual power bears this mark because she has faced her own illusions first. She has stared into the mirror long enough to see not only the face she wanted to believe in, but also the shadows she once denied. She knows what projection looks like because she has seen her own. That is why she recognizes it so quickly in others. Her eyes are not merely organs of vision, they are instruments of truth. They hold the memory of nights spent unraveling lies she once told herself. They reflect the pain of peeling away comforting illusions, the ache of realizing that some dreams were cages and some loves were chains. To carry such vision is not a gift without cost. Seeing through illusion means she cannot be soothed by surface appearances, cannot be tricked by the comfort of denial. She walks through the world awake, and that is never an easy path, but her vision is not for condemnation. The spiritually powerful woman does not wield her sight as a weapon to shame or expose. Instead, it becomes a quiet form of liberation. When she looks at someone and they realize she sees them, truly sees them, they feel a strange relief. The mask slips, the performance drops, and for a moment they are free of pretending. Her gaze grants permission to be real, to set down the heavy armor of illusion. In this way, she heals not by fixing but by revealing. Still, not everyone welcomes such vision. Many recoil from it, terrified of what might be uncovered. They accuse her of being too intense, too piercing, too unsettling. They prefer the comfort of shadows, and her sight feels like exposure. Yet even those who resist cannot forget it. Her eyes linger in their memory, unsettling them in the quiet hours of the night, whispering truths they are not yet ready to face. This mark is invisible, yet it cannot be hidden. It shines through her even when she says nothing, even when she tries to soften it. It is in the way she notices the smallest tremors of expression, the way she senses contradictions between words and gestures. It is in her refusal to be fooled by the masks of society, the shallow glamour of appearances, the glitter that conceals emptiness. To her, illusion is smoke, and she has learned to breathe beyond it. For Jung, the journey toward individuation required this very sight, the courage to see one's shadow without turning away, and then to see it reflected in the world. The spiritually powerful woman bears this courage in her gaze, and those who meet it are changed. Whether they admit it or not, this is the second unseen mark. Eyes that cut through illusion, not to wound, but to reveal. Eyes that carry both the wound of knowing and the gift of truth. Eyes that remind the world that nothing hidden stays hidden forever. Asterisk, there are stories told in whispers of women, whose eyes could see beyond the veil, who carried sight that pierced disguises and shadows alike. Some called them witches, others seers, some even saints, but always the theme was the same. They could not be fooled. The spiritually powerful woman walks this same lineage. She does not claim the mantle of prophecy, nor does she boast of supernatural gifts. Yet those who meet her eyes often feel as though she sees something no one else can. Imagine her in a conversation, where lies dance easily across tongues. A man speaks with conviction, weaving charm into every syllable. To others, his words sound smooth, persuasive, almost irresistible. But her eyes remain steady. She does not interrupt, nor does she accuse. She simply watches, and in that gaze, the mask begins to slip. The man falters, though he does not know why. His confidence wavers, his words tangle. He feels exposed, though she has not said a thing. What he feels is the weight of truth pressing against the walls of his illusion. There are other moments, gentler ones, where her sight becomes a bomb rather than a blade. A child sits quietly in a corner, insisting they are fine, that nothing is wrong. The world, too busy and distracted, takes the words at face value. But she kneels, meets the child's eyes, and sees the tremor of fear, the shimmer of unspoken grief. She does not need an explanation. The truth is there, alive in the depths of those eyes. And so she offers comfort, not in questioning, but in presence. The child feels seen, and in being seen, feels less alone. This power is not always welcome. To see through illusions is also to live without many of the comforts that sustain others. She cannot pretend that shallow flattery holds value. She cannot be soothed by empty promises or dazzled by false brilliance. Her vision strips the world bare, leaving her face to face with the rawness of things, the fragile truth of love, the weight of loneliness, the inevitable decay of all masks. It is both a burden and a gift, and it shapes the way she walks among others. Jung described the archetype of the seer, the one who perceives what the collective unconscious hides beneath layers of denial. He suggested that to see in this way requires first enduring the terror of seeing oneself. The spiritually powerful woman has walked this path. She has looked into her own depths, seen her own illusions shattered, and survived the disorientation that follows. That is why her gaze unsettles others. It is the gaze of someone who has already endured what most people run from. Sometimes her sight feels mythic, as though she carries fragments of ancient stories in her eyes. In one culture, they might say she sees with the owl's vision, able to navigate the dark. In another, they might compare her to the oracle at Delphi, whose eyes reflected truths too raw for mortals to bear. Yet for all the myths and symbols, the essence remains. She sees without being deceived. Her gift is not the ability to predict the future, but to unmask the present. And that, perhaps, is the rarer gift. Those who are drawn to her often find themselves confessing more than they intended. They begin speaking casually, then stumble into truths they had long buried, surprised at the words spilling out of their own mouths. They ask later, "Why did I tell you that?" "I've never told anyone," and she only smiles, for she knows it is not manipulation but resonance. People feel the safety of her sight, even when it makes them tremble. They sense that she does not look to exploit or condemn, but simply to know. Yet this mark is not only about others. Her vision serves her. There is a silence that follows every wound, a silence so deep it can echo through years, even decades. The spiritually powerful woman carries such wounds, though few will ever see them. They are not the kind that leave visible scars on skin, but the kind that live beneath, buried in the marrow of her being. These are the wounds that do not close, the marks of betrayal, abandonment, grief, or loss that time alone cannot erase. People often speak of healing as though it is a clean and final process, a journey with a beginning and an end, but she knows differently. Some wounds resist closure, not because she is weak, but because they serve as thresholds, reminders of truths too important to be forgotten. To live with them is to live with both pain and wisdom, woven together so tightly they cannot be separated. Imagine her as a child, once innocent and unguarded, who reached for love with open hands. Perhaps it was not returned. Perhaps it was broken. Perhaps the very ones meant to protect her became the source of her hurt. In that moment, something shattered, a trust in the world, a faith in permanence. The wound did not heal in the way others expected. Instead, it deepened, forming roots that spread into every future connection as a woman grown. She carries this ache quietly. At times, it flares like fire, sudden and consuming. At other times, it rests in the background, a dull throb she has learned to live with. Yet it is always there, shaping how she sees, how she chooses, how she loves. She is cautious where others are careless. She looks for depth where others settle for appearances. She knows that joy can be fleeting, and so she holds it with reverence when it arrives. Jung spoke of the wounded healer, the archetype of one who, having been broken, learns to guide others through their own brokenness. The spiritually powerful woman embodies this. Her wounds do not disqualify her from strength. They are the very source of it. Because she has endured loss, she can sit with another in their grief without fleeing. Because she has known betrayal, she can sense falsehood before it reaches her heart. Because she has carried pain that lingers, she does not fear the vulnerability of others, but welcomes it. Still, there are nights when the weight of it all presses hard. When memories return unbidden, when her body remembers what her mind tries to forget. When the old ache feels as raw as the day it began. These are the moments when solitude is not chosen but demanded. When she retreats into silence, not to escape the world, but to gather herself against the tide of her own history. And yet, paradoxically, these very wounds become a kind of compass. They remind her of what truly matters, of the necessity of truth, of the sacredness of love when it is real. They strip away the trivial and the shallow, leaving only what is essential. Though she may never heal in the way others imagine, she transforms her suffering into depth, her pain into presence. Those who meet her sense this, even if they cannot name it. They feel the gravity in her silence, the weight in her words, the tenderness in her touch. They may not know why, but they trust her, for she carries the knowledge that only the wounded can bear, that life breaks us all, and in those breaks, something larger than us enters. The wounds that do not close are not signs of failure. They are living testaments to her endurance, to her willingness to remain open despite the pain, to her refusal to numb herself into oblivion. They are proof that she has felt deeply, loved deeply, lost deeply, and still chosen to continue. This is the third unseen mark. The scar beneath the surface, the ache that never vanishes but instead becomes part of her essence. To stand in her presence is to stand near someone who has walked through fire and carries its heat still within her bones. There is a silence that is born of fear, and there is a silence that is born of power. The spiritually strong woman knows the difference. Her silence is not weakness, nor is it the surrender of someone who has no words left to speak. Instead, it is deliberate, chosen, almost sacred, a silence that carries weight. That unsettles those who expect easy answers, and that speaks louder than any protest ever could. From the outside, her quietness may seem like withdrawal. Others may misinterpret it as detachment, shyness, or even coldness. But within, she knows what it truly is, an act of discernment. She has learned through trial and error that not every thought is worthy of being voiced. Not every truth needs to be offered into ears that cannot hear it. Words, once released, can be twisted, misused, or wasted. And so she guards hers, offering them sparingly, like coins of rare value. In this silence, she finds a refuge from the endless noise of the world. Society thrives on constant chatter, on the demand to explain, justify, and perform one's life for others. She rejects this performance. When she is quiet, she is not empty, she is listening. Listening to her own soul, to the hidden movements of her intuition, to the subtle currents of life that pass unnoticed by those who fill every moment with sound. Carl Jung once said that solitude is for those who are strong enough to endure it. The spiritually powerful woman has not only endured it, she has embraced it. Her chosen silence is a discipline, a way to hear the whisper of her own depths without being drowned out by the expectations of others. It is here that her inner voice grows strong, unshaken by the shifting winds of approval or rejection. But her silence is not only for herself. It is also a form of resistance. In a world that constantly demands explanation, she denies it. In relationships where others expect her to over-explain her boundaries, she simply does not. Where others shout, she remains still. Where others insist, she waits. This refusal to meet noise with noise is unsettling to many, because it forces them to confront their own chaos. Reflected back in her stillness, those who misunderstand her may try to provoke her into breaking her silence, to pull her into arguments or confessions she does not owe. They may call her distant, detached, unyielding. Yet she does not bend, for she knows that silence, when chosen, is not absence, but presence. It is the fullness of her being held back, not out of fear, but out of mastery, and sometimes her silence is the most eloquent thing she can give. It can end conflicts that words would only inflame. It can protect her spirit when disclosure would expose her to harm. It can remind those around her that she is not theirs to command, that her soul belongs first to herself, not to the demands of the crowd. This silence is not emptiness. It is a language. Those who learn to sit with it discover that it holds truths deeper than speech could ever carry. In her silence lies her strength, her independence, her sovereignty. This is the fourth unseen mark, the silence she chooses, the stillness that is not weakness, but wisdom. To stand in her quiet is to feel the steady pulse of someone who has nothing to prove, someone who knows that the loudest power is often the one that does not need to speak at all. Asterisk, at the heart of every spiritually powerful woman, there is a fire. It is not the kind of fire that consumes everything in its path, wild and reckless, leaving only ruin behind. It is steadier, deeper, older, a flame that endures through storm, through loss, through the long winters of the soul. It is a fire that does not die. She may have been tested 1,000 times. She may have been broken down, stripped of illusions, betrayed, silenced, and left to rebuild herself from ashes more than once. Yet through it all, the flame within her never extinguishes. Even in her darkest moments, when despair seems to press like a weight upon her chest, she feels its faint glow, a reminder that something inside her refuses to surrender. This fire is not about anger or vengeance, though it can burn with righteous fury when justice is denied. Nor is it about ambition, though it drives her to rise beyond the limitations others try to impose. It is the essence of life itself within her, the unyielding will to continue, to transform, to expand. Jung might have called it the spark of the self, that central force that pushes a person toward wholeness. For her, it is both her anchor and her compass. There are moments when this fire flares bright, illuminating everything round her. In these times, people are drawn to her, captivated by the intensity of her presence. They may not understand it, but they feel it, the certainty, the clarity, the quiet force of someone who has walked through shadow and emerged still burning, but just as often. The fire glows, low and steady, hidden beneath layers of patience and restraint. Even then, it is no less powerful. In fact, it is in this quiet endurance that its true strength lies. It does not require spectacle. It does not demand to be seen. It simply is, and it waits, steady and faithful, for the moments when it will be called to rise again. This flame allows her to hope when others have given up. It allows her to forgive when bitterness could have taken root. It allows her to keep creating, loving and giving, even when life has shown her its harshest faces. Those who encounter her may think she is extraordinary, but the truth is simpler. She has chosen again and again not to let her inner fire be put out. The fire that does not die is not something she guards jealously. On the contrary, it warms those who draw close to her, giving them courage, reminding them of their own hidden sparks. Her strength becomes a mirror in which others see possibilities they had forgotten. Yet she knows the fire is hers alone to tend, hers alone to protect. She will not let it be drained by those who would only take without giving.